Hello and welcome to today's featured webinar, Recovering from Ransomware, Before, During, and After. My name is Rick Vanover and I am on the product team here at Veeam. I'm happy to bring this content here to you today. We're doing this live. I was pulling up the clock just a second ago so you could prove that this is indeed live, that we are bringing this content to you. So a couple of administrative points on the webinar here today before we get started. Number one, this webinar is being recorded and you're going to get a link to replay this as well as get these slides, which are pretty short. Most of what we have here today is a demo. So we'll jump into the product here in a moment. You're going to get a link to the slides and a link to replay that here sent as a follow-up email. So you can share that with your colleagues. Everyone is on mute, but if you do have a question, use the question panel in the GoToWebinar control. I can see it. It is just me here today, but I will do my best to answer your questions. We have 4 main segments and then some time for your questions today. I do want to keep this right at 30 minutes, but I want to give you a brief overview of the platform. I want to talk about immutability configuration, the malware detection, and then all of the powerful recovery options you have with Veeam. Like I said, most of this is demo. As you can see, you see that there are 3 different segments here with demo in the agenda here today. So a lot of demo, but I do want to just let everyone know that the Veeam Data Platform, the current set of security, is very, very powerful. In fact, it's started with virtualization in 2008, and oh goodness, look at what we have now. We protect 4 hypervisors, 3 public clouds and cloud native applications with Kubernetes, 5 physical agents, several enterprise apps, as well as software as a service. People come to us for backup and recovery, but also analytics and monitoring and orchestrated recoveries make all the difference today. So that's just a brief overview of the platform. If you haven't looked at Veeam lately, please do. So many new capabilities have come over the years, and in particular with the Veeam Data Platform release late last year. So let me show you some of this great stuff. All right, I'm going to jump right into the demo. Now, one of the things when it comes to recovering from ransomware is really having a good sense of the different storage options, the repositories that you have available to you. I have several here on this list. And I talk a lot to our tech support team who handles the cases for ransomware. Make no mistake, the one piece of advice that they say is have 1 or more copies of your backup data on immutable storage. That is the single most important thing to know. And there are so many opportunities today. A lot of times people, are familiar with the public cloud options for immutability, but also there's the Veeam hardened repository, or the Veeam VHR, I like to call it. That's a very easy way to have direct attached storage on Linux with immutable file attributes. And there also are service providers and more. Now, I know that there are a lot of different ways that you can have your backup data under management by Veeam, but I want to show you something that I like is probably one of my recommendations. If I just met you, for example, and you ask me, what do you recommend? Well, I like the idea of combining 2 different immutability engines. And one of the best ways to do that is our Veeam Scale Out Backup Repository. Now, if you're familiar with Veeam, hopefully you know what a Scale Out Backup Repository is. I'm going to walk through and show you here in just a moment. But the thought here is that this is a policy engine for your backups, and you can have a lot of control. I recommend giving a Scale Out Backup Repository a very clear name, like double play immutability. That means there's 2 different copies of immutability on this Scale Out Backup Repository. And the notion of a performance tier is where backups are the landing zone. And what I mean by that is this is the first copy of where backups go. So for data center environments, it's presumably on premises. And then at Veeam, we've talked a lot about the 3-2-1 rule. That's where I want to introduce you to the capacity tier. This is where you can extend your backup storage to a second site. And that, in this example, is Wasabi, immutable storage in the public cloud. And then you also have options right here, I like this one, to copy backups immediately as they're created. So once a backup is taken on premises, it's immediately copied into the capacity tier. And I highly also recommend that you consider moving backups when they're out of their operational restore window. So if you've done many data recovery tasks, chances are it's from some of your most recent restore points. So in this example, I'm putting backups older than 14 days. I'm moving them into the object storage capacity tier. This could be a lesser expensive resource, and it also is off-site. And it's a really good idea as well to keep that immutable. And the beautiful thing about this also is that I can also encrypt this backup data. Now, this is really important. I highly recommend that if you put backup data in the cloud, encrypt it with your own encryption key, or someone else might do it for you. So this is a really good look. And by the way, if you have any interest in AWS Glacier or Azure Archive storages, that is supported as well. And what's awesome about this is that these individual repositories have their own immutability. So if I was to look at this individual repository here, this is the on-premises immutable storage one, the blue, I can show you the individual configuration here. So when I take a look at this individual storage system, I'm making the backups that sit on premises, I'm making them immutable for 7 days. This is object storage, so there's the bucket, there's the folder. Not everybody has object storage on premises. This particular system is. It's really easy nowadays to have immutable copies on premises. Like I said, not everybody's ready for object storage, so I want to introduce you to the Veeam hardened repository. Now, the Veeam hardened repository is direct attached storage on Linux with Veeam backups written on immutable attributes. Now, what's really attractive about this is that there's no additional Veeam cost, and you can easily put backups anywhere. Now, I want to highlight that the example of the scale out backup repository that I made was of 2 object storages, but I just want to highlight you have a lot of flexibility here. I can mix with a couple of different rules, but I can mix different storages. For example, I could mix fixed local disk and NAS. So for example, I have like a Windows file system, an SMB path, and an NFS path. I can combine all of those to aggregate them. And I can even get into some policy engine options like use per machine backup options, and I can do full backups if keep the backup jobs running if something's missing. So there's a lot of logic in the scale out backup repository. But like I said, if I just met you for the first time, this is my recommendation. And if object storage on premises isn't an option, right here, for example, you could substitute the Veeam hardened repository here in this blue section and put the Linux hardened repository right there instead of another object storage. And it's really important to know that when I talk to our tech support team, the single most important recommendation is to have 1 or more copies of your immutable data. And when you look in Veeam 1, this is across all of these different environments in here, you have very good immutability. Let's take, for example, that scale out backup repository that I was just looking at. I have good visibility to the consumption and the usage, but I also can go and see what type of immutability configuration is in use with these different storage resources, as well as their performance, right? You'll see immutability right there, 5 days. So I have very good visibility. So make no mistake, I highly recommend that you use one or more copies of immutable data to drive ransomware recovery. And when I look at the agenda here, I think it's important that you understand immutability really drives the rest of the conversation, meaning one or more copies of immutable data. That will tell you how your recovery will go. So it's really important when you think about building your immutability to drive that recovery. So now what I want to do is do something really interesting. I want to simulate some ransomware, and you can see how this will drive how you respond and what you do. I want to draw your attention to the inventory section of the Veeam backup and replication user interface. In version 12.1 or 23H2, there's a new section here called malware detection. Now, I highly recommend that you check this out. I'm going to go ahead and configure this and then explain it. This is a global setting. This first option is the inline entropy analysis. I encourage you check this out. I'm going to go ahead and turn it on, and I'm going to get a warning. This is an important warning I want to bring your attention to. By turning this on, we will have to skip the change block tracking. Right there, you'll see that it's going to skip the change block tracking of the next backup job. This is generally okay, but if you're managing a very large environment, I still recommend you turn it on like this. It is a global setting, but what I'd recommend you do is go into the exclusions and add basically everything to the exclusions, and then in a phased approach, take them out of the exclusions if you are worried about how this will impact your environment. So if you're ready to see a malware, possible ransomware happen and the Veeam detection engine catch it, let's do it. I'm going to go back over to Veeam 1, and I want to explain to you my little trick that I'm doing here. I want to draw your attention to this system here, malware sim 06. Now, I've done a few other examples. I've done this webinar a couple times today. You can kind of see how I operate. I keep the system powered off because it has something on it, on the file system and in the contents of it that will immediately be detected. So I'm going to turn this system on. And by the way, if you didn't know, Veeam 1 has a whole bunch of built-in command and control functions here. This is the quickest way to turn a system on. You don't have to go log into your virtualization platform. This works for VMware and Hyper-V. So I've turned on this malware sim 06 system, and this particular system has this threat on it. So I've powered it on, it's running, it's coming alive. I'll give it a second to turn on. I have a backup done already, okay? So I've done something to this to make this system a candidate for detection. So let me go ahead and just check to make sure it is working okay. Give it a second here. Once I see these numbers come in, then I know that it's alive. I just want to give it a second. And then I'll highlight back over here. I already have a malware detection on-demand backup job set up, and it's already run. And you'll see that malware sim 06 has already been backed up. Okay. I'm going to just run the backup job. This would be an incremental, and this one should be alive by now. We should have some data come in. I'm sure it is. This is just an incremental backup job because we've already backed it up. There we go. And it's actually busy. Something's going on this system. But what's going to happen here is this malware detection is going to detect something and it's going to flag it. While that incremental backup is running, I want to draw your attention to two things. One, when we do this run, I'll let this go for a second and get started. You might know about Veeam, and you might know that we recommend the Veeam backup and replication server. Maybe don't put it on the internet. Now, this new capability does automatically query Veeam for some of the logic for the detection. And I want to draw your attention to KB number 4514. 4514 will allow you to update the suspicious files without internet access on the Veeam server. So if you're not familiar with this, I highly recommend that you check this out. But basically, this will allow you to download the latest version of the suspicious files, and it tells you where to put it in the Veeam server. On this KB also is this really cool API, and I'm going to come back to that. And it's also important to note that do not modify this file. This file has a signature on it, and if you're the ransomware or the threat actor, the first thing you're going to do is build an exclusion for yourself. This API, by the way, is also visible on the internet. Now, you can see we're at version 64. It's probably incremented 20 times in a month or two. And basically any ransomware you can think of is in here. Here's a ransomware that I've had some people talk about. Here's another one that I've had some people talk about. Basically, we're also looking for their files on disk. And we also have the other logic that's looking for their individual things like onion links and things like encrypted files and more. And you can look for any different ransomware type in here. Chances are you'll find it, anything that you've ever heard of. There's over 4,000 in here. But again, if you don't have internet access on your Veeam environment, you can use this offline copy to protect it. Now, one thing I want to draw your attention to is when we do this backup, I did turn on the malware detection, and we should, let me see if I can catch it on here. We should get a note that malware detection was used, and it's going to skip the change block tracking. So we'll let this go here, and this backup job will run. But what you're going to see happen here is that, see if I can find it. This malware detection is going to fire off and catch something. So I'm going to leave it right here. So basically, while that backup job is running, that inline malware detection should find something that it doesn't like on that malware sim 06 system that I just added in. And let me just double check and make sure I did turn it on. I did. Okay. And also it might even flag it over here in Veeam 1. You'll see the system is still kind of busy, pretty busy for just being turned on. I don't actually have a quote unquote application on it, but I do have some tricky data going on. Let's see if we can catch it over here. One of the things that I should highlight about this inline malware detection is that there are occasionally some false positives. And if you are in this area of the Veeam backup and replication interface, and you have something come in here, there it is, just in time, marked as suspicious. if you have something come in here, this is potentially really concerning. And I'll show you also that if you go over here, you'll see that, oh goodness, I've got this weird icon on my backups on disk. Okay, don't worry, but do indeed take a look. And I should also highlight that over here on Veeam 1, check this out. It has a warning of potential infrastructure malware activity. Note that this is a warning, it's yellow. Watch this, watch how cool this is. So once Veeam has detected this, the first thing it's going to tell you is known malware extension. Okay, that's one of the two different types of detection that are in there. And what you do is you click on that history and take a look at those details. Just right click on details and it gives you this really specific log right here. And here it'll tell you exactly what it said. It said, here's when it happened, who ran it, all that information is good. And then right there, potential malware activity. This was a name of a known threat actor from a file extension standpoint. And then I might say, well, what exactly was that? Let's take a closer look. So you can get that log file. And what's really, sorry about that. Let me get that. I didn't copy that correctly. Get this file right here. And then you just go open this up. And what I like about it is it actually had 3 hits. So it tells me a lot of good information. There's a file called bad day. That's potentially really concerning. So let's take a closer look. Now, if I have a backup or a system that's marked as suspicious, you have some really cool information here. First of all, you can mark it as clean, maybe a false positive. Now, I know that this one isn't, so I'm not going to do that. Show history, that's where you get that log view. That can tell you a little bit more about this environment, what specifically happened. And if you wanted to immediately drive recovery, if you had some critical data on here, note this is not the whole system recovery, it's just files and disks. I'll come back to whole system recovery. But what I really want to draw your attention to is the scan backup option right here. That is the coolest part of this. Watch this. If I go to scan backup, now I know that there's a lot on here, but let me just do the basic options and explain it. This is the most impactful option, in my opinion, right away. 1, find the last clean restore point. This is going to look from the latest to the oldest restore point and find the first malware-free restore point. And then I can do one of 2 ways, or both. I can scan the restore points with an antivirus engine, or I can use the Yara rule. If I have, for example, my cybersecurity team has told me that we have detected, some of these ransomwares in our environment. Let's look for them, okay? But I'm going to just use the built-in anti-malware scanning right here. So watch what happens here. I'm going to go ahead and start this, but while this happens, I want to show you something that's really powerful back over here. That scan that I just did is built on integrations natively with this list of products. Now, I realize not everybody's using these products. I will tell you for Veeam environments on Windows, this is built in. This is already in place. And for many environments, this is pretty good. I am using Windows Defender with ATP, Advanced Threat Protection. So it's actually a little bit upgraded, but it is very powerful. Now, if these aren't the ones you're using for your EDR, your endpoint malware detection, you can actually over here configure in this XML file how to call your anti-malware product by a command line. So check this out at helpcenter.veeam.com if you're not familiar with this. And then just look for malware detection, right? That malware detection section will walk you through all of this. And the inline scan is what I just did during the backup. I guess just to walk you through this, I configured it. And now what we're doing here is we're actually scanning the backup. This is what's actually happening while we're talking. But I'll go back over here and show you what I've got. Now this failed is not failed like the scan didn't work. This failed means it found the virus. That's very different than it actually failing from the scan. So this message, you have to look over here. Virus threat was detected. What's really powerful though is it's going to go to the restore point before it, right? Because remember the option was find the last clean restore point. So it's working backwards in this Veeam backup chain to find that. I'm going to let that finish here. But what I want to highlight to you is that now you might remember that said suspicious before. Now it says infected. And the reason why is these triggers over here are updated. So now instead of just known malware extension, this is actually telling me, hey, the Veeam Secure Restore engine with the AV malware scan actually had a positive hit, that there is something wrong with this most recent restore point. Now that scan is still going, and what's really powerful here, and I know how this is going to end, I want to just show you. If you look at the chain, now I did do a few tricks in the lab to make this happen. We already determined with the scanning engine that this restore point is no good, right? Got the little red X on it, it's infected. I can't trust it. But what's happening right now while we're talking is the previous restore point is being scanned, and we don't know yet. The icon will change right here. If it would, a red little symbol would come on it if there's a problem. And by the way, if you have copy jobs and if it's going to the cloud, that same restore point would be marked accordingly through it all. Now, what I want to highlight is I know that when I come back over here, this scan will still be running. Let's see if we can find it. It's been detected by the content scan. Now that scan it might still be running. It is done. So the last clean restore point is the one that I was referring to. So if you look at this history here, this other one is marked clean. So this is where I need to do my recovery, right? So I can mark it as infected if my endpoint detection system told me otherwise, right? Or this one, I could mark it as clean, right? I could adjust it here manually, but you want to do that very carefully. I also want to quickly jump back over into Veeam 1. Now it is red. It was yellow before, right? So the logic is connected here. But in this situation, I don't trust this system. I'm going to power it off. Something's not right. Let's power it off. So that malware sim 06 system is going to be powered off momentarily because Veeam 1 has reported that this one has that malware from that detection inside of Veeam backup and replication. Now from here, it's time to recover. So what I'm going to do is to go over here and do a restore. This particular one is a VMware one, and I'll do all the restore options that I would have. In fact, sometimes an easier way to look at this is to take the individual system and take a look at the recovery options like this. Now, what I want to do is kind of close the loop. If you know Veeam, you know that we can drive all kinds of recoveries. I think there's over 100 scenarios available right now. We can take systems and convert them to different hypervisors. We can put them into the cloud if we need to take a look, and also should let everybody know that Nutanix is now supported for a recovery conversion technique. But you also have all these abilities to pull individual components out, files, individual virtual disks, and more. So what I want to do now is actually show you how that file looked. So I'm actually going to take the infected restore point. So the scan is complete. It's important to see that little checkbox right there. The scan is complete. The first one's clean, the second one's infected. I'm going to take that infected restore point and I'm going to do a file level recovery. So if you've ever done a file level recovery with Veeam, you know it's pretty straightforward. In this situation here, what's happening is we are opening up the infected restore point. Now I got to be careful here because my internal IT staff, if I do something wrong, it might lock me out, but we'll see here because this is data that shouldn't be on a network. I'll just say it that way. So if you remember from that log entry, these were the files, right? These were the files that were the problem that were detected. Now, I could restore them, whatever, but I actually want to do kind of an interesting little trick here. I want to do Windows Explorer. So I want to show you just how nasty some of these data are. So here's a little trick if you're not familiar. If you do file level recovery with Veeam, it mounts it through the file level recovery path right there. So there's a little trick if you didn't know that. But anyways, see if I can even I can't even open this file. So I'm immediately getting, I can't even show you what this trick is that I've made. But I just want to give you a sense that when these files arrive, when this bad data is seen by Veeam, you have the ability to do these different recoveries. And so it's a very powerful way to do these recoveries. And I'm going to go ahead and restore the entire virtual machine. And you just go to the clean restore point right here, the one that was marked clean. And I'm just going to restore the whole virtual machine back to the way it was. And in this case, I'm just going to do the quick rollback, which is only the reverse change block tracking. Now, because I have a threat that's been detected, I'm also going to consider doing the secure restore, the additional scan, but I already did the scan just a second ago, so I don't need to do it again. But if you're ultra paranoid in a real type of scenario right here, you could do this scan. This was basically the same engine that we had just a second ago. I'm going to skip it, but basically, just like that, friends, you can restore your data back with Veeam. And so hopefully that gives you a good view. And by the way, it is going to delete the one that's there and recover it. That's fine. I don't want this anymore. So let's go ahead and do this recovery. So I hope that that was a quick view. This was supposed to be a 30-minute demo / webinar. I did go over a little bit, but I will take a few of your questions here. I do see one question from Landra. Landra asks, does the Veeam detection engine need any additional products? Actually, very good question, Landra. No, it needs to only use additional products, this list, if you're doing the explicit scan. The inline detection is Veeam's own technology. So basically, the inline malware detection, that is a Veeam technique, and it's based on what we see and know about ransomware behaviors. Good question. One question comes in from Rondego, apologize for the name. What are the Yara rules and how do I do those? Good question. So one of the things you can do, and by the way, that restore is underway, which is good. But when you do a scan, you might have noticed I had a bunch of ransomware rules already in there and things like that, okay? One thing you can do is if you go over here to this short URL, vee.am/Yara, if you go in there, I have Yara and script library, and I have a whole bunch of content to get started. And here's one of our persons in Veeam product management with some good Yara news and malware detection posts and really good stuff up here. So the other thing I'll highlight is there's some featured Yara rules. So if I go over here, you can search featured Yara rule top 10 ransomware. So that will probably update maybe once a quarter with some of the top ones, but you can go to the Veeam community hub at community.veeam.com. You get all kinds of good stuff there, but you can definitely get more information on Yara. All right, I have time for one more question. Let's see. This one I'm going to take from Stephen. Stephen is asking, what does the malware detection require from an infrastructure standpoint? Good question, Stephen. Right now, today, it requires that the backup be an image-based backup of Windows, either on VMware, Hyper-V, or as the Windows agent. Now, it's reasonable to expect other OSs and other platforms will be supported, but I don't have a timeline I can share at this time. I can tell you it's a popular request, but those three data sources are really the biggest culprits, right, when it comes to some of the threats. So hopefully that answers your question. All right, well, apologize if I didn't get through all your questions. I am by myself on this session. I really do appreciate everyone's time here today. Again, my name is Rick Vanover. I hope this was a really good, quick view of some of the different ransomware recovery options, from the immutable copies to the inline malware detection, and then how to get out of that problem with the data recovery. On behalf of the big global Veeam team around the world that helped bring this content to you, I appreciate your time today, and that concludes today's webinar.